its fourth year, the Copenhagen Songwriter Festival is only getting bigger and bigger, with performances from songwriters from not only all over Scandinavia, but also Germany, Holland, Kurdistan, and the US. And the festival also produces songwriting workshops for its delegates of songwriters. We spoke to the festival's founder and driving force, Brett Perkins, to find out a bit more about his vision and the background to the festival.
Well, I'm originally from Southern California, songwriter, performer. I got to Denmark by falling in love with another songwriter and following her home. In 1996 we met and started coming here in 97. And immediately discovered that it was a very, very fertile environment for the type of music I was doing, what's now called Americana. I think we were just calling it sort of songwriting then. and also being from outside and having a background in the U.S. music market, that was of interest to a lot of the unions and organizations here for educating their members. So I quickly became a guest speaker and then guest teacher on songwriting and marketing and some of the things the Danes at that point weren't as advanced in. Certainly they were in songwriting, but in promotion. The Americans, I mean, we get it from third grade on. and here we have the Jente law, which is the opposite, the idea that don't put your head above the rest, and sort of, I think, remnants of all the things that work well in a social democracy, but maybe need to be bumped up a little bit as far as independent artists. So I stayed and eventually married and now have a family here. And
fantastic. So tell us about the Songwriter Festival. How did that start? How did that crazy idea get into
Well, the crazy idea of a music festival has been in my head for about now 20 years. Originally in Los Angeles, and it just never seemed to be the right time, or it wasn't the right time, I should say. And it's a different challenge to do it in the States, but I've been presenting songwriter shows and live music for 34 years now. So when I came to Denmark in 97, I brought the Listening Room Concert Series, which I was doing in Los Angeles and around the various parts of the US, and actually around various parts of the world through different organizations like the Folk Alliance and MEDEM. I was putting on showcases of songwriters there. So I had established a brand, although Listening Room is a generic brand in a sense now, and songwriters in the round format. And I brought it over here, and I started the series here. And at that time, there was no songwriter series. There was no songwriter scene. There had been in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, a legendary place called the Purple Door in Copenhagen. So I heard about that series, and I went to the same theater where it used to go, and I brought something back, a new scene, and people responded, and from there I started doing these workshops and encouraging others, planting seeds, Johnny Appleseed of folk. And I like the Captain Kirk of songwriting. I heard that once, that was better. But telling different groups how to start their own clubs. So they'd say, oh, we don't have a scene in Esbjerg. Well, it's simple. You just, the two of you start meeting and start inviting other people. And it can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. So here we are 15 years later, and I don't claim nearly the amount of credit that I'm often given for this explosion in the songwriting scene here, but there are over 20 clubs throughout the country now that are meeting regularly, putting on open stages. In Copenhagen, there are 5 nights a week, sometimes 6 nights a week, that you can be out playing original music or hear original music. So in this arc of 15 years, Copenhagen specifically, and Denmark, has gone from, quote, what I was told, no scene, to being the center of live songwriter performance in Europe, I would argue. Berlin certainly has as much activity, but it's not as centralized, and Copenhagen is so centralized that it is that scene. So the festival was, for me, a natural next place to go from this build-up.
So at its core, what's its vision? What's the vision of Copenhagen Songwriter?
Yeah, the vision is threefold. One, first and foremost, it's community, and so the slogan says celebrating songwriters new and known. So as a festival, the intent has been from the beginning that it's about leveling the playing field, pardon the pun, acknowledging that there are those who have had greater success with their craft and have brought their craft to a higher level of development, but also doing so without excluding those who are just showing up, the ones who are going to amaze us 10 years from now, or the ones who are standing up speaking their truth, who we may never get to know their name, in our household, but still it has a value, as I believe all arts have to the society. So, and fortunately, the Danish culture and the Danish tax system supports these kinds of initiatives, which makes it easier to put on this kind of event. So the second area is education, because I find that artists are woefully undereducated about the rapidly changing industry. Who's an expert? I mean, it's constantly changing. And there's an inclination not to know too much, because a lot of artists have expressed to me, and I've had this own struggle earlier in my career, that if I became too right brain, I would lose the access to the other side. And there's some validity, having that balance. When you're writing songs, the last thing you want to think about is who's going to buy this, or is it going to sell, because that's just not, for me, has nothing to do with the writing process. That has to do with the rewriting process and the marketing process and the recording process. And so the educational workshops have increased every year. My long-term goal, which is at the 10-year anniversary, next year's 5-year, is to have at least a 2-day music industry expo, similar to what we did in Los Angeles when I was heading up the National Academy of Songwriters. We had the Los Angeles Music Expo, Songwriters Expo, and 2 days of panels of publishers, of promoters, of radio people, of hit writers. I mean, just anything and everything you needed to know and needed to ask would be available. And then the festival model in 5 more years, or the 10-year anniversary, is similar to the Copenhagen Jazz Festival, where it's an internationally known, it's like one of the destinations if you're a fan of songwriting, which is a pretty wide genre. So that I expect with a 2-week period we would have Tivoli involved, we would have shows at the Opera House, we would have small cafe, almost busker open stages. And the third aspect is, and what I'm introducing this year, is songwriting awards for the first time. There's community building awards, and they're international. I have, folks don't know they're receiving the awards yet, but from Iceland, from Sweden, from Germany. There are emerging artist awards for Finland, for Norway, for the Faroe Islands, for Greenland, and for Denmark, of course. And also industry community service awards for people who have gone beyond their job description at CODA, at some of the unions and guilds to support this initiative and the songwriting scene, as I've watched it develop over the last 15 years. And the eventual idea with that is to have a very high-profile awards show, similar to what we put on in Los Angeles with the Academy. We had the Lifetime Achievement Awards and the Salute to the American Songwriter, with Joni Mitchell coming out and receiving and performing, Randy Newman, Stevie Wonder, Leonard Cohen. And it can happen here, because if you set the scene and you do it respectfully and you have the budget, you can bring in pretty much anyone you like. But at that point, we're bringing in the biggest names because of their songwriting. We're not buying the latest happening package that you could see on all the other festivals and trying to be the coolest place in town, even though I think we are. If you're a songwriter or a fan of songwriting.
That is